With Chicken Run: Dawn of the Nugget coming to Netflix this weekend, I went back and revisited the original film, Chicken Run, which was a childhood favorite of mine. It was made by Aardman Animation, who is known for making Wallace and Gromit, as well as other DreamWorks productions such as Flushed Away. And this animated film is essentially a prison break movie, but with chickens, in which you have this chicken farm where all the chickens escape before Mrs. and Mr. Tweety put this machine together that makes chicken pies. And with the help of a rooster named Rocky, who they think can fly, he teaches them how to fly, or at least try to teach them how to fly, before the machine gets made and all the chickens are essentially killed. Now, like I just said, Chicken Run is a childhood favorite of mine. I remember I had the VHS, but even really before the VHS, I remember I had The Prince of Egypt on VHS, and before the movie started on that, they had previews of 2 DreamWorks films that were coming from DreamWorks in the year 2000.
Chicken Run. The feathers fly for the summer of 2000.
Now, which bunk is mine?
Only in theaters. The Road to El Dorado and Chicken Run. DreamWorks animated features for 2000.
And that's The Road to El Dorado and Chicken Run. I remember when I used to watch that movie all the time and seeing those previews, I was excited. And then I finally saw those movies. I wore those VHS tapes out. And The Road to El Dorado, that is a review for much, much later. But for right now, let's get back to Chicken Run. And I even remember some of the toys and marketing for Chicken Run because Burger King, they had Chicken Run toys. But if you collected all the toys from Chicken Run and put all those pieces together, it would form that chicken barn play that was at the climax of the movie. I had all the pieces, and once I made that little chicken plane, that thing gave me life. But how do I feel about Chicken Run over 20 years later and with adult eyes? This is a very clever movie because, like I said, it's essentially a prison break movie, but with chickens. And it almost has like all the different prison escape tropes in this movie. You have the one person trying to find different ways to escape, but then they fail and gets put in confinement and then taken out. And like I said, this was made by Aardman Animation. The animation in this movie is stellar. And given that this was the first feature-length film that Aardman Animation had made, I'd say they knocked it out of the park. And there's even some scenes where it almost feels cinematic. Now, as for the 2 leads, you have Ginger, who is the head chicken, trying everything to figure out ways to escape, and then she comes across a rooster named Rocky, who she sees one day flying in the sky. She helps him, nurses him back to health, and asks them to teach the other chickens how to fly. Now, of course, Rocky is voiced by crazy-ass Mel Gibson. And it's funny because all this time, I never really knew that Aardman Animation is a British animation company. And it's crazy because all this time I never really realized that Aardman Animation is a British animation company. And most of the chickens are played by actors with British accents. And so Mel Gibson, he's just the one American in this movie. And it's just crazy how everybody's talking all British and has a Cockney accent or what have you. And then you come across Rocky, he's talking normal. Not saying that British language isn't normal. Don't get it twisted. But like, I'm just saying it was just a little bit jarring, but in a good way. But regardless, Ginger and Rocky, they carry this movie, as well as the human characters, Mr. and Mrs. Tweety. And their dynamic is just hilarious in itself because Mrs. Tweety is clearly the dominant one in the relationship, and Mr. Tweety, he's just not, and he's the bumbling idiot. These chickens are up to no good, but then Mrs. Tweety, she just doesn't believe him because she thinks he's an idiot, and then it turns out at the very end, he was right. Now, outside of those 4 characters, you have some of the other chickens who have some of their own personalities, but they don't really add much to the movie. They're just there to either be different from the 4 main characters or just there to be a running gag. Like you have Bunty, who's the standoffish chicken. You have Mac, who is the brains of all the chickens. And of course, I gotta talk about the plot twist of this movie, spoiler alert, because we all know chickens can't fly. So when Ginger finds the other piece of that poster with Rocky flying, and it's at the bottom, and it turns out he was shot out of a cannon to make himself fly. But then after that, they soon realize that the other rooster within the group, he has history with planes, and so they stitch together a plan to take all the chicken houses and put it together and make some big chicken barn plane just so they can get out, and they do get out successfully, and now all the chickens are free. Chicken Run was a childhood favorite of mine, and it still is to this day. It may not be one of my favorite animated films, But I do have a soft spot for this movie, not just for stop motion animation, but this movie came out during the genesis years of DreamWorks Animation, when DreamWorks Animation was trying to figure out where did they stand amongst all the other animation companies, especially at a time when Disney were the ones on top of the Disney Renaissance, and Disney was starting to fizzle out, and people were starting to take notice with DreamWorks with films like Ants, The Prince of Egypt, The Road to El Dorado, and then Chicken Run. In that first phase of DreamWorks, I really thought that's where they were really going. There was going to be the counter argument to Disney, but then Shrek happened and they just kind of switched things around. And hey, but I'll always be grateful for that particular era of DreamWorks, and Chicken Run definitely contributed to that. If you have not seen Chicken Run, I highly recommend it, and it's a great watch for the kids. I'm going to give Chicken Run the heart eyes emoji.